Now that we understand the basics of elements, parent-child relationships, as well as alignment, let's move on to sizing our elements. So on the screen here, I have a group parent element that we just made in the last tutorial, as well as two buttons. Now they are aligned to parent, so they are snapped to the top middle and top left, as you can see here. So let's see what happens when we need to resize buttons and how that works. So we'll go into button A, and we will come over to layout. Once you're in layout, you can see that we have the width, height, as well as the margin and padding that we discussed in the last video. Let's see what each of these does. So right now you can see it's default checked to make this element fixed width. What does that mean? It means exactly what it says. That element can be no larger or no smaller than 189 pixels. No matter the screen size, no matter any other element around it, it's always going to remain the same size. So let's see what happens if we uncheck that. Okay, so you can see the button went across the entire page here. Why does that happen? Well, the reason is because we have a max width field that you see pop up now. So when you check it, there is no max width. When you uncheck that, there is a max width available, defaulted to infinity. That means it needs to take up as much space as possible within that parent element. So you click it, unclick it, and you can see how it behaves there. So let's leave it unclicked, and then we'll put a max width of 200 pixels in. Now you can see it's just slightly bigger than 189 pixels. Let's make it more apparent, 300. You can see it defaults to the max width, not the min width. So keep that in mind when you are doing your sizing. Now the same rules apply down here for height. So say we want to make this element a fixed height, gets rid of that infinite box, and you just put how big you want your button. So you can see it got a little smaller. If we want to make it 150, it's a little bigger. Now if we uncheck that and we uncheck fit height to container, now this is something new that width does not have, you can see it drops down all the way to the bottom. As much space as is available, it's going to take up. So if we check that again, it snaps back to 150 pixels. If we were to give this a max height, you'll see nothing happens. The reason being is because it's defaulting to fit height to content, which means it's only going to be as big as the content inside. More often than not, you're going to find yourself using that fit height to content, and I do as well, just because it is always the exact size that you need it to be, and normally you don't want components taking up as much space as they possibly can. Now let's go over margin and padding that we touched on previously in the last video, but I want to go over a few more things just so you can see in practice, as there are some rules that apply when you're playing around with margin and padding. So let's say we enter 10 pixel margin on the right side of our element. So you can see nothing happened. All you can see is that there is now a 10 pixel space to the right. It's not yet interfering with this button over here. And now let's see if we make it bigger, what would happen. So you would expect that it would move this Edit Me button over, because this is the minimum space we want around our element from any other element. But you have to keep in mind that margin and padding, margin specifically, only is affected by its parent element. Meaning if we put a top margin of only 10 pixels, you can see it does move down. The reason being is the relationship between the child and parent are what are affecting each other. Now, siblings do not bounce off of each other, meaning if we put this 100 pixel margin right here, this sibling component to this sibling does not move. It only moves according to its parent. So again, if we did a left margin on this button B, it moves. But okay, so why does this one move and the other one does not? So the reason this moves is because it's moving from its original positioning, meaning it started at 0. This is its baseline position. This is where it always wants to be if you don't have any margin on either side. Now, if you put a margin and it does have that room to move away from its original position, it's going to move. Now, the reason it didn't move over here is because we're already pushed up as far as we can against its parent element. And that's why this one will move and this one will not. Again, I recommend doing this along with me, just so you understand how it's moving on your own. You may find stuff we don't cover in this tutorial that happens to you that you may have to play around with, but just keep in mind that all the same rules and principles apply regardless of your specific use case. So let's go back to this component right here, and we will go and play with the padding now. So right now we have 0 padding. So that means that there is no space between this border and this content right here. Now let's give it a little space in between every side. Now you can see faintly that there's this dark blue space between the light blue, which is the content, and the border. Let's make it even more prevalent and give it a 20 pixel padding. And now you can see it's even more prevalent, the space between this content and the border itself. Now that we have a basic understanding of how these elements move around, change sizes, interact with each other, let's actually get into the components and the design itself. So for that, I'll see you in the next lesson.